Megastructures are the biggest structures an empire can build, ranging from cheap and high function to straight up expensive and useless. There seems to be a massive misunderstanding as to how good and how bad some megastructures are. So here I am, dispelling these beliefs with a terrible Stellaris Megastructure Tier List. First off, we have to talk about the basic megastructures. Most, if not all of them, require mega engineering. Not here. First up, orbital rings. Cheap mini ring worlds around your planets. They are broken, straight up. If there was a single thing solely responsible for a huge amount of power creep, then it would be the ridiculously powerful production modules. Instead of adding a bonus percentage modifier, they instead add base production, effectively multiplying its effects on top of every other percentage bonus in the entire game. The fact that this applies to basically all jobs is also even more insane. Automatic S tier just makes your empire better in every single way. This is not even mentioning how they are also quite decent at fortifying a system, as there won't be just one starbase but multiple. Extra shipyards, naval cap, or even extra districts. Build them whenever possible.
But I'm not done yet!
First, I have to talk about Star Trek Fleet Command. Build up your base and explore an open world with stunning graphics as the captain of the USS Enterprise, with many iconic characters. You can even battle your friends and other players around the world, forging alliances, making enemies, and generally having a great time in a thriving community of like-minded people, keeping you on your toes as the enemy fleet might be right there in front of you, or maybe you're just hallucinating and it's just a convoy of allied trade ships. Either way, it's fine. Transporters and replicators add depth to the gameplay, providing interesting strategic options that allows for exploration and innovation of the game mechanics. Of course, we can't forget about the new impressive Star Trek story in the Kelvin timeline, making for a captivating storyline anyone could enjoy, like the new Officer Luther Sloan and new features like wave defense and more. On top of that, it's free. Download the game using the QR code on screen or my link down below to join the ranks in the Fleet Command. And don't forget to use my code WARPSPEED on screen now. See you there. Habitats. Once the crown jewel of playing tall has been nerfed to the ground, becoming a shell of its former self, now requiring a massive amount of orbitals to function properly. Once it does function with the gazillions of orbitals, it can be a pretty decent way to make up for your small space, but it isn't exactly ideal, as you can't take advantage of orbital ring bonuses to base resource production because, you know, there's no orbit to ring around. Haha, I know, hilarious. So, are they useless? No, research habitats are actually more efficient than normal planets, as you just have to specifically spec into making exclusively research districts and ignoring everything else. You can also use them as fortresses, but if you do so, avoid building any orbitals, as enemy forces right-clicking them will spell disaster for the habitat, adding devastation and even blockers. Thankfully, the AI doesn't do this, so as long as you're on single player, you're all clear to make recklessly orbital habitats. B tier. Although not as powerful as before, it definitely has its place as a research station and fortress bunkers. Hyper relays. What if you didn't have to deal with hyperlanes? Then this megastructure is just for you. How this works is that the relay would work as a makeshift hyperlane by connecting itself to other relays on neighboring systems, bypassing the need to move within the system and outside of it. Just be aware that this megastructure can screw over with your fleet pathing, likely making your fleets run slower or getting them killed outright. And even if your fleets manage to run away, there is also the issue of practically gifting the enemy a great escape route and path for reinforcements in the event of an invasion. There's also another downside of allowing the enemy to just bypass your fortress worlds if they have a neighboring bring relay under their control. To avoid that, it's recommended to leave a gap in the relay network when there's a fortress to make sure there is no way to actually bypass them. And in the case of preventing them from being used by the enemy, it's just better to not build them near your border. And if you're really paranoid, just avoid building them entirely. B tier, very useful as a mobility tool for your slower ships, but can be very dangerous as it can give an invader the tactical advantage. Also, you do need the Overlord's DLC, which is a minus for your wallet. These things are still cheap in comparison to the horrible ones later though. Wait, I meant the in-game cost, not real life. Gateways. Forget about relays, this thing makes movement instant. The ability for instantaneous travel from one point to another without delay is not only convenient, but also extremely useful in allowing your reinforcements to arrive much faster than normal. This very ability allows you to sustain a prolonged conflict far away from your home territory, which likely will happen when the horrors come. S tier. This thing is cheap, fast to build, and also super useful in both peacetime and wartime for the most boring aspect of both: logistics, the bane of any marching army. Alright, now we're getting into the intermediate megastructures, all of them requiring mega engineering. Oh, and the Utopia and Megacorp DLCs too. But if you got this far, you're probably in too deep anyway. Science Nexus. What if you had the ability to basically buy 30 researcher jobs with 50,000 whole alloys? I'm sorry for talking about economics in a megastructure tier list, but I think making comparisons in the equivalent amount of pop jobs would be easier to understand. Now, if we assume your metallurgists make 10 alloys per pop, you would need 41 pops working in alloy production for 10 whole years. Even if we say that the infrastructure and upkeep costs for both making alloys and tech are roughly the same, it's still pretty bad. Alright, it takes 15 years to pay for itself. Big deal! There are just better megastructures in terms of impact or economic output for way less. The only saving grace is the research speed modifier, which is applied to all science types in addition to everything. A tier is what I would have said before the Paragon's DLC, because now it's trivially easy to get 50% tech speed bonuses just from your counselors. Not to mention the insane buffs you can apply to your researchers now due to the new leader rework version 50 test branch 3457, codename Leaders Are Finally Balanced 2.0, which is also another reason as to why tech ascendancy fell off in the first place. The actual effect of 10% or 15% in addition to 50% something tech speed is abysmal. So laughable in fact that I would say that if this were to ever get nerfed, then it's safe to bump this megastructure up a few tiers. For now though, it'll just be C tier, a useful albeit expensive megastructure that can be hit or miss. Sentry arrays. Is someone being a little fishy? By building this, you can bypass nebula's sensor blocking. That's literally what this thing does. Are you thinking it does something more? Good joke. For the low price of 1,000,000 alloys, you can get some base intel level on everyone. Guys, holy crap. Look at that. I can see enemy ship designs without intel. Holy moly. This is revolution. E tier, bad. You spend how many? 5, 15, 25, 45,000 alloys and 25 years just for that. Wow. Also, that energy upkeep is pretty insane for what it does. You're better off spamming intel gathering operations or just sending in one army transport everywhere. At the very least, it only takes half the time to build compared to normal megastructures and has some use in revealing nebulas and unreachable unknown systems. Interstellar assemblies. Okay guys, what if we paid a gargantuan amount of alloys for leverage?
Yes,
No more will we squabble over pointless issues. Let this be the dawn of a new galactic age. In the name of the new galactic imperium. It's just deployed. Oh, and slightly more AI opinion. Wow. Round of applause, guys. This is truly insane. For the low, and I mean low price of, I don't know, 45,000 alloys, you can get some customary benefits that barely do anything to that horrible opinion penalty your neighbor has. If anything, they would feel insulted at how useless the megastructure is and invade you anyway to specifically demolish this piece of junk. S tier, plainly overpowered. In fact, it's so good that it ascended being good and arrived dead last. What an amazing turn of events. It's actually F tier. I know, what a shocker. Mega art installation. Now, this thing's the equivalent to 50 bureaucrats making 8 Unity each. From this, you would assume that this is quite decent. Wrong. This is ignoring the humongous 50,000 alloy requirement and the reality that Unity in general is a very weak resource later into the game. By the time you have the tech and resources to build this, you'd already be handling insane amounts of admin cap and tradition trees, both combining into absolutely astronomical Unity costs for each tradition, not even mentioning how by that time you would have already snatched up all the good traditions. Any extra ones are just fluff at that point and wouldn't help you much. So yeah, E tier. The only factor saving this thing from garbage F tier is that it actually gives bonus amenities empire-wide. Still abominably expensive for what it does though. Strategic coordination centers. It only gives 150 naval cap, but if you use the 6 extra starbase cap filled to the brim with anchorages, it would give you 366. Hey, that's not bad. Until you realize that starbases aren't free. Now, assuming you have modular engineering, each starbase will cost you around 1400 alloys. Multiply that by 6, then add 50,000 alloys on top, and voila! You get a whopping 58,000 alloy build just for 366 naval cap, not to mention the build time. If it's expensive but fast to build, I can somewhat understand it being a tool to expand your navy in a quick emergency. But this is just ludicrously expensive for no reason whatsoever. This is the equivalent to 61 soldiers making 6 naval cap each. But again, this is ignoring how expensive it is to make those alloys in the first place, especially compared to just employing conscripts. Thankfully, there's a small footnote that gives all your ships a little bit of speed, which is actually more impactful than everything else here. It helps in kiting and not getting kited yourself. Heck, I argue people that built this thing for naval cap is missing the point. It's in essence just a speed megastructure. C tier. Sadly, very much outclassed by pretty much everything, but still very useful in combat nonetheless. So, it's not all bad. Mega shipyard. It's basically just a shipyard, but big. I'm gonna tell you straight up, this thing's the best megastructure out of everything. Or at least that's the common sentiment. Why? Because it's fast to build and cheap as hell, at least compared to the others on this list. 5 years for each stage and only costing 33,000 alloys in total. Seriously, you actually get something tangible in a short amount of time with a reasonable price to boot. But do not think that this is a silver bullet that will magically make your problems go away. Think about it. What's more useful? The ability to rebuild faster or the ability to actually have more ships in the initial stage of the war? More ships in the battle that was lost would have certainly helped so much more. If we tally in the actual cost for 5 starbase shipyards, it would cost you around 7,000 alloys and some energy. Add a mega shipyard into it and suddenly they all cost a whopping 40,000 alloys. Are you willing to spend 5 times the base cost for shipyards for 4 times times the ability to rebuild? Or are you instead willing to spend these alloys on ships in the initial stage of the war before you lose the battle in the first place? Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying this thing's bad. In actuality, it's probably better than pretty much everything on this list by a long shot because 1. It's cheap, and 2. It's super fast to build, even if you're not a fan of the fact that it's basically just an over-glorified shipyard. There's merit in the very fact that it's the cheapest and fastest option for getting Galactic wonders. From pure functionality alone, the Mega Shipyard is B tier, but as a stepping stone to Galactic wonders, it becomes A tier. Quantum catapults can only be built on pulsars and neutron stars. Gives the ability to warp with accuracy. If that accuracy is measured in stormtrooper aim, target this a couple stars away and suddenly your fleet runs the risk of splitting up, potentially getting crushed individually by the enemy, or at worst, landing on close quarters and being forced into MIA for 10 whole years. Not to mention the fact that the warp time is also relative and not fixed, so the splitting up issue is double bad in both timing and position. But I have a hot take brewing. Even with all that said, I think it's still S tier. Okay, put down your pitchforks. It's my personal rating. If used normally, it's just B tier. The restrictive placement means it's very hard to find a proper use case for them, aside from a dirty trick you can do. Now, when your fleets are pretty small, the variation in warp time is gone. How do we abuse this? Build a gateway on the hyperlane, entering the system with the catapult. Click on all your fleets and then target set system. After everything charges up, your fleets will all arrive at the same time and with the fire rate bonus. Perfect if you want to do a daring jump drive maneuver to a target near your gateways, or as a way to bump up your diplomatic weight just before a resolution passes. There are many ways to abuse this, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. You can do this even with a level 1 catapult costing just 15,000 alloys. So with this trick in mind, it goes up to A tier, but it does require a hyper-specific use case. Still cheap for its results though. Galactic Wonders, the crown jewels of a galactic empire. Galactic Wonders requires at least one intermediate multi-stage megastructure built to full completion. Only then will you have the option to research and build these monumental construction projects. Ring worlds, the big brother of orbital rings. Sadly, they seem to have dropped the ball in the genetic lottery. Not only is it an unreliable big brother, but it also can't cooperate with its little brother. Yeah, you can't put an orbital ring on a ring world. Is what I would have said before there was a shadow buff to them. T2 production buildings of any type have a very small difference on ring worlds because they give the same effect as the corresponding orbital ring building on top of the normal effect they provide to base production. As a result, ring worlds, unlike habitats, have the same production efficiency as normal planets, with the additional effect of full habitability for all species. I initially had a terrible opinion of this megastructure before I realized this core fact, as before they would just be more expensive habitats. Oh, also the high world density, which saves you a lot in empire-sized modifiers from number of colonies. B tier, surprisingly better than most multi-stage megastructures, just from the fact that they're amazing worlds for research, with a whopping maximum of 100 jobs of all types possible on each ring, except mining. That's not included, for well, obvious reasons. What are you gonna do? Mine the ring worlds themselves? Go play Shattered Ring, you can actually do that. Dyson spheres and and matter decompressors. Alright, time to compare this star umbrella to this singularity extractor. If we compare them side by side, it's obvious that the Dyson's the winner here. It produces double the resources while also not specifically needing to be built on a black hole. Now this doesn't sound too bad until you realize this means that if you get unlucky, you might be forced to either build it on a vulnerable position or just not build one in the first place. Not to mention how energy is needed for basically everything, while minerals are just for construction and industry. Construction being useless because by the point these things come online, I would assume that your planets are already maxed out. If not, stop it, get some help. As for industry, by this point, you're able to get comically high upkeep reductions, so much so that minerals stop being an issue entirely. Well, as long as you don't research the terrible production tax, that is. Like seriously, a maxed out eco-monopolist combined with a chat forge leader is basically gonna remove any semblance of realism, as you're basically just synthesizing military grade alloys from thin air. Now, the one and only upside of the decompressor is the fact that it's faster to build. That's literally it. The comparison literally just ends at how much they produce and how fast they are to build. Trade offer, would you like to burn alloys or burn alloys? So yeah, Dyson spheres B tier, while matter decompressors just D tier. In the grand scheme of things, both of these are just massively expensive resource sinkholes that can't exactly be called good by any stretch of the imagination, especially when compared to just how cheap the things in S tier are. But come on, this is Galactic wonders. I think we're way past that point about cost. Expensive means better, right? Combined with the fact that energy is much more useful than minerals by the time either of these are buildable, is basically the final nail in the coffin for the decompressor, and hence why the terrible rating. But wait, there's one more? The etherphasic engine. When grand ambition meets insanity, it gives rise to a new dawn in the galaxy, requiring a gargantuan amount of highly exotic dark matter to complete, forcing you to sacrifice 20% of the galaxy for its unimaginable power. Are you willing to pay the price? If so, get ready to fight everyone. The engine will give you energy, minerals, and even naval cap. S+ tier, the only megastructure in the entire game that gives you the ability to straight up win the game. It's also basically just a Dyson, decompressor, and strategic coordination center all in one package. Do note that this megastructure spawns in your capital system, and if you lose your capital system, well, the engine blows up, and not in a good way. When I said that 20% of the galaxy needs to be sacrificed, I'm not joking, by the way. The dark matter costs are ridiculous. Thankfully though, you start with 2 death cubes, and stars going explodey gives more dark matter the smaller the galaxy. But you know, the issue of having to fight literally everyone while doing this is still present, so it doesn't get any better on that front. Lose the engine, you're dead. Lose your fleets, you're dead. Lose the cubes, you're dead. Still ridiculous that this thing's basically the win button while simultaneously being 3 megastructures at the same time. Now, what if they're wrecked? When you rebuild a wrecked megastructure, it won't count towards your megastructure cap, but will still count as a fully built multi-stage megastructure, which means Galactic wonders. So they're pretty much all worth it to rebuild just for that. Well, except maybe for one, the Interstellar Assembly. Please avoid that one like the plague. It just sucks so much. But wait, you should like and subscribe now for, you know, good reasons. And thank you to Alaya West and everyone else for supporting me thus far. I know my upload schedule is a bit abhorrent, so I swear December will be flooded with uploads.